So what are equalizers? Equalizers are the most important tool in music production since they deal with the balance of the spectrum response of a sound. In this case, I have put this EQ on the master track and I have soloed out only the drums, so we'll be filtering those with the filters contained within this EQ. So an EQ is actually a collection of filters that we can go through and change the spectrum response of the sound going through the equalizer. Let me play this and show you some of the types. First off, we have the cut filter. As you can see for this one, it's a low cut filter. It means that it cuts all of the frequencies below a certain point, center frequency that we choose. In this case, 856 Hz, so nothing lower than that passes. And we will go more into detail when dealing with all of these filter types. Now, the next one would be the shelf filter. So it attenuates or boosts all of the frequencies beyond a certain point. So not cut, but attenuate, just like a shelf. So for this low cut or high pass filter, meaning it cuts low frequencies or lets the high frequencies pass, we also have its natural pair, which is the low pass or a high cut filter. Just like that one, but the opposite, not letting any of the frequencies go through anywhere higher than the center frequency we've chosen. Of course, we will go into detail of all these filters. We have this shelf filter I've shown you. We have peak filters that can only boost or attenuate a certain band of frequencies. And we also have more than just these three types. We have more complex types in different equalizers. Now, why is this so important? Well, the main thing we do when we produce music is we adjust the spectrum response, like this, of certain elements so they would mix better with each other and give us a better mix, better result. So EQ is the most essential tool for music production. Now, aside of EQs like this one, we also have different equalizers from different manufacturers. Let's say like this EQ, the FabFilter Pro-Q, which also doesn't have any fixed filters right there off the bat, doesn't have any filters engaged. So the curve it's applying to the spectrum is flat. It's doing nothing. So there is no difference right now. You see that? And we also have included in the EQ a spectrum analyzer to help us work. So once I double click anywhere right here, I get a filter. This time it's the bell filter or the peak filter as I've shown you. Like that, I've shown you just in the Ableton's EQ8. But we can change that filter type to be a low shelf, as I've shown you, the shelf filter. We can make that a high shelf filter, affecting only the high frequencies beyond a certain point. We also have the, beyond these two shelves, we also have the cut filter, like that, a low cut or a high pass filter. We have a high cut or a low pass filter. We have a notch filter like this, which completely eliminates a certain band of frequencies down to 0, you see that? So the gain is disabled. We can only deal with its width using the Q parameter and the frequency where we are removing a certain band of frequencies. We have a band pass, which only lets through a certain band of frequency, cutting everything beyond both points, left and right, which is actually a combination of the low pass and high pass, or a low cut and a high cut filter, these two together. So we can choose how wide the band of frequencies we are letting through is. Let's hear that one. And we can, of course, choose how steep it's going to be, just like that. A very helpful thing on this analyzer is that we have the analyzer showing us the signal that is coming into the EQ and the signal coming out of the EQ with stronger color only. So you see, we can see the old signal, it's coming in, and we can see the new signal coming out. What we actually done, what is the change we have applied to the spectrum response of the sound we are processing. Also, one of the filters we have right here in this EQ is the tilt filter. So the tilt filter, tilt shelf as we call it, has the low shelf and the high shelf at the same time. So pulling this gain up would mean that we are bringing up the high shelf and pulling down the low shelf, so attenuating the lows and boosting the high frequencies, or vice versa, just like that. So we have two shelves in one, and with the Q parameter, we can choose how steep the change from one shelf to the other is going to be, just like that. Or we can choose decibels per octave drop. Now we will go deeper into these parameters and their explanation once we deal with the EQ specifically. But this is what the EQ does. So it's a collection of filters that we have at our disposal. So I can add more filters. I can add in this one a lot of filters. And we use these filters in an EQ to shape the spectrum response of the sound coming in. So the most essential tool in music production is actually an equalizer. Aside of this parametric EQ type, where we actually can choose the center frequency, we can choose the gain. So we choose the frequency, the gain, and we choose the Q, so the width of the band of frequencies we are affecting. And we call these parametric equalizers because we have control over all the parameters. We can, of course, also choose the steepness of these filters, but these are parametric equalizers, so we have all of the controls over all of the parameters. Now, there are different types of equalizers, so I could show you a graphic equalizer. Let's find one. So what are graphic equalizers? Well, in graphic equalizers, usually, they are used in analog gear, and what they do have is fixed Q, so width of all of these points is actually fixed value, and the frequency for each one of these parameters that you see here, each one of these EQ points and filters is also fixed. So this one is at 500 Hertz and we can't move that. It's right there. The only thing we can affect is the actual gain. Now, newer ones like this one, which is an emulation, we actually can affect some of the parameters, but usually those in analog gear are not being able to be affected. So the only thing we can affect is a certain frequency for a certain gain, so up or down. And you might notice that some of those parameters are actually flexible. So the Q actually narrows down as we go further up, and it narrows down as we go further down. But we will get into these specifics when we get to the EQ specifically. In this lesson, we're just doing an overview of all the EQ types. So that's a graphic equalizer because it graphically represents the actual curve we were making using these faders that we actually position up and down. So even on analog gear, when you see this, you can actually imagine the curve being produced by the equalizer, what we actually set onto the signal path. That's why they call them graphic equalizers. Now, another special type of equalizers is also the ones that we have in plugins today, and that's emulation of vintage gears. So, emulation of analog vintage equalizers. Let's find one of those. Okay, so here is a really specific one. So let's hear this equalizer. And since this one doesn't have any spectrum response, I'll just turn on the span for you so you can see what's happening to the signal. So this is a very special type of EQ. It's emulating a vintage gear Pultec equalizer, which for its controls has the low frequency selection, has like 2 equalizer filters. So both of those can select a certain frequency they're going to affect, the central frequency, 20, 30, 60, and 100 Hertz for the low one, for the low frequency filter, and 3 kilohertz, 4 kilohertz, 5, 8, 10, 12, and 16 for the higher filter we have. Each one of them also has the boost and attenuate buttons, meaning that one button is used to boost the certain frequency and the other one to attenuate. So it has separated controls for those. And that's actually how it was on the original gear that was used. So in that sense, this is a replica of the actual analog gear. One other thing we do have is selecting the bandwidth of one of those filters. So let's try that. So you see when I bypass it, no effect. So that's exactly what we are doing to high frequencies at 8 kilohertz. Not really that sharp. So we have special emulations of vintage gear, and they do come with really restricted parameter control. But that's for a reason, because that's how it was on the original gear. And this is why we get them with the same controls, with the same feeling. They actually try to emulate the sound of special gear that we had. Now, with certain types of equalizers, like the one I showed you before, like FabFilter, I will just delete these dots we had. These. Just like that. Now, some of these equalizers can actually affect the left and the right channel separately. And why not? They are stereo equalizers. So what I could do right here is choose for this point to be only affecting the left track, only the left channel. Let's hear that. And I can maybe introduce the new one and tell it to just be on the right. So let's try that. So we can have a separate equalizer, basically, on both of these left and right tracks that we have. So left and right channel can be equalized separately. Now, another thing we can also do in this equalizer and also in the EQ8 of Ableton is we can process mid-side. And that's a special type of processing where we actually process everything that is mono, so everything that is identical on left and right channels, and we also separately process everything that is not identical on left and right tracks. So let me show you what is identical and what's not identical in this signal. I will actually delete these points. And by using the panning control right now, I can play only what's mono, so what's identical on left and right. So that's what's identical, and this is what's different on left and right tracks. Now immediately you see that the kick drum has disappeared, since in my tracks and most of everybody's tracks, the kick drum and the bass portion of any song is actually mono. So once I tried to play everything that is separate and everything that is different on left and right channels, the kick drum disappeared, since it's completely the same on both. So this is actually separating what's mono and what's completely stereo in this signal. So we're separating what's identical on left and right tracks and what's not identical, what's different on both left and right. So we can separately process those two. Let's say I want to center this like that, using control and clicking. Now what I can do is take one of these filters, let's say, and click this scissors, separate it, and now I have everything that's stereo boosted right here. Let's try that. Most of that is reverb, because reverb usually is quite stereo, and we can actually cut down on everything that is mono at the same point. Let's hear that. So essentially what we did here is attenuate all the frequencies right here on only the mono part of the song and boost them up on the stereo parts of the song. So essentially making this drums sound more stereo in this piece of frequency range right there, like right here. So many different types of processing that we can apply with the equalizers. But we will get into all the specifics once we get to the EQ level.